it's time to begin our public program. Okay, so here's the schedule. I'm going to welcome you. I'm doing that right now. Then we will give the awarding of the Kevin O'Donnell Distinguished Friend of Korea Award to Mr. Greg Caldwell. David Roden will present that. Greg will say a few remarks. And then our giving back recipient, we will also ask them to come up. We'll take a picture together. If you'd like to say a few words, that would be wonderful. And then our plenary speaker, Miss Aimee Lee. And then we'll have closing remarks and ways that you could be involved. We'll have the adjournment, but before you leave, in the back of the room, we'll be wheeling in some tables with Korean food that you can try. Okay. So to begin any program, it's not just a few people putting it together, but it's many hands helping put a program together. So at Ohio University, we want to thank the College of Arts and Science, the Chaddock and Morrow College of Fine Arts, the School of International Studies and Languages, the Ohio Program of Intensive English, International Training and Development, and the Korean Culture Club, and Dr. Kim of Geography is the advisor. And in Athens, locally, we have Miss Irene Kim. Irene, are you here? Not here yet. And if you don't know Irene, it's where you can get hey dumplings and kimchi. It's built right here, made right here in Athens, Ohio. And then the local Friends of Korea team too, with everybody helping in. So round of applause for all of you too. Okay, and now what we'd like to do is award the Kevin O'Donnell Distinguished Service Award to Greg Caldwell. And David, please come up. I'll get you.
Sorry, Greg, there's no check.
I was hoping for
Well, no. Yeah, it is really a great honor and pleasure for me to be able to present this to you. Everybody in the room can read here a little bit, but I have just a little story to say that I first met Greg in Korea. And that was back on one of our trips as honorary consuls. And we met, and I took an immediate liking to Greg. He's a really good guy, and I was traveling at the time with my wife, and we enjoyed our initial lunch together, and we kind of palled around together on the trip and got to know each other a little bit. Subsequent to that, we met again in DC for one of our Friends of Korea meetings, and the two of us had a chance to go over to the Freer Gallery where I was able to gain access to the archives. So we went down and prowled around in the basement there a little bit with Louise Court, who was the curator there. And that was pretty interesting. We got to see a lot of artifacts, including a tintype of the Korean emperor and empress that was given to Alice Roosevelt. And then her granddaughter apparently didn't want it, so they donated it to the Freer Gallery. So we had that experience together. But the thing that most impressed me about Greg was the love that his students have for him. And I know I use that archaic thing called Facebook, but you were all over that. And you're a peripatetic traveler. I mean, I envy your trips into the stands. Most recently, you are always going somewhere and meeting your former students. And they have utmost respect for you, given the fact that they have this endowment for you, which is pretty special. So I know you're dearly loved by all of your students because the passion that you put into teaching and to everything that you do. Also with the veterans, we both work with Korean War veterans. This is a little known thing. The Korean government offers trips to Korea for these people who are in their 90s now. They defended Korea against North Korea during the Korean War, and they're entitled to a trip back. And Greg works with all of these veterans to help them, and maybe if they passed away, he helps with the families to obtain a medal, Ambassador of Freedom medal. It's very, very special to the families and to the soldiers that have served. So Greg has done so many things, and he is so deserving of this award. And I'm just really pleased that I'm the one who's able to present this to you today. So with that, maybe we can bring this over and get a nice photograph, and then we'll let you give your comments. Let me put this down.
Let you give it to him.
Yeah, I got that to roll and make a loud noise. Great, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, sir.
So for our online audience, you may wanna move it a little closer to the center.
Sorry. We were supposed to be over here. We get a do-over here or what?
Why not? Come on.
You get a do-over.
Do-over.
All right, so for those of you online, our good
Okay.
friend and
Oh,
longtime
I see.
colleague,
Thank you.
here we go. Okay. I think that
Alright.
worked.
Yeah, got you.
Thank you.
Okay. I will turn the mic over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, David and Gerry. I was quite surprised, some weeks ago when Gerry called me and informed me that I was going to receive the Kevin O'Donnell Award. And I had no idea that I was even being nominated for it. And the first thing I did was to go on the Friends of Korea website to see what others, people had, who had received the award. And I looked at all of their accomplishments and I thought, you know, my accomplishments pale in comparison to a lot of those people on that site. But still, I'm very grateful to the selection committee that nominated me and that chose me. And I appreciate, I want to give a special shout out to Bruce Kim, who was a former board member of FOK. And he evidently nominated me for this award. He lives in Portland, Oregon, where I am. I regret that I never got to meet Kevin O'Donnell, I'm sorry, in person. But he left Korea before I arrived in my group, K-17. But we're all of us here today should be thankful to him, not only for his service in Korea, but also for the fact that he played a critical role in saving the Peace Corps in the early 1970s. My love affair with Korea began in 1971 when I arrived in Chunglo. And I was a Peace Corps teacher, taught English to first-year middle school students. And the students at that time were 12 years old. 54 years later, I am still in touch with about a dozen of my students in Korea. They are now 67 years old and retired, if you can believe that. And I go back to Korea about every year and a half, and I always try to meet them whenever I can. In Oregon, where I live now, we have about 25,000 Koreans and Korean Americans in the state. But while I was working at Lewis and Clark for some 35 years in international studies, it was not easy for me to break into the Korean community. The first generation of Koreans were pretty insular in many ways. But when I retired in 2011, it was my privilege to become the honorary consul for Korea in the state of Oregon. And I had always wanted to get involved in the Korean community, but I couldn't quite do that at the time. But the position opened up a whole new world of involvement, work, and service with and for the Korean community. And having that title, and we all know that Koreans put a lot of emphasis on titles, that kind of opened up the whole community to me. And it was a blessing for me, and it was a good way to start my retirement. Over the 10 years that I served as honorary consul, and I retired 2 years ago, I worked a lot with organizations that I never would have had any interaction with. First of all, the Korean veterans, you mentioned that. They are all in their mid-90s now, and I call them the salt of the earth. It's so much fun working with them. with educational programs as well. I went to Korea and took a group of about 25 middle school students to Korea for 2 weeks. That was a lot of fun. I work a lot with the Korean adoptees that I didn't know very much about in the beginning. We have thousands of Korean adoptees in Oregon because Holt International is headquartered there. And I've worked with a lot of Korean politicians and figures in Oregon. Our current governor is going to Korea at the end of this month, and she's asked me to meet with her privately to give her some cultural cues and clues, things that she should or should not do. Her father was a Korean War veteran, and that kind of opened up the world to Korea to her. I work also with second and third generation Koreans in professional organizations. That has been a lot of fun as well. And of course, I work with Peace Corps volunteers. We have 40 Peace Corps volunteers in Korea. They lived in Korea. 40 of them are in our state, and every year we have a dinner in honor of Peace Corps. So for me, Korea holds a very special place in my heart, as I know it does for you as well. And I would just say to the many students I see that we have here, please try to get to Korea. If you have an interest in Korea, there are many opportunities to go to Korea, Fulbright, summer programs of language study, and so forth. So do what you can to get there. It'll open up a whole new world. And you can also consider the Peace Corps. Even though they don't go to Korea anymore, it's the toughest job that you'll ever love. So again, thank you for this award. I appreciate it very much.
Now we're going to move to our Giving Back initiative, and our first recipient is the School of International Studies and Languages, and Friends of Korea will be donating, if you want to come to us as well, will be donating $2,000 for outreach activities related to East Asian culture throughout Appalachia. I think Dr. Aimee Lee, the director of the School of International Studies and Languages, is here too.
You didn't go and check it.
No, you don't.
Especially the treasurer. That would be a bad move.
Aimee, what do I do next?
Thank you so much.
We get a photo out.
Gerry.
Would you like to say?
Just gotta go. We keep making this mistake. Oh, this is what happens when you get older, you know? You make the same mistake.
That was practice.
Thank you. That was practice. I appreciate that.
Okay, everyone. Another round of applause.
Actually, please do it. You can make some comments.
Yes, please. Here's your mic.
You're not escaping without making.
I'll just make a
And
few.
be in the center.
I would just like to make a few brief comments to express our deep thanks and gratitude to the Friends of Korea for this award for the new School of International Studies and Languages. As Gerry mentioned, we just launched the school last week. So this means we need to open an account.
Yes.
This is our first. So thank you so much for for this very generous and meaningful gesture of investment in the School of International Studies and Languages. And thank you also to the Friends of Korea for choosing to come here to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio for your annual meeting. Athens, Ohio is such a special place. Our students and our faculty and our friends and partners all over the world make Ohio University and Athens this special place. We're all here today because we love to bring the world to Athens and we love to open Athens up to the world. And so many of our Ohio University alumni have gone into the Peace Corps or have come to Ohio University after returning from the Peace Corps. So across decades, we've had a very, very special relationship with the Peace Corps. And Gerry can talk more about that. But Ohio University, because of our location in Southeast Ohio and in Appalachian America, we've always been very, very committed to the idea of bringing international studies and languages to the local communities and to the local schools, the K through 12 school systems. We've done this through, of course, the Ohio Program of Intensive English, through Becky and Gerry and their colleagues, and also through the Ohio Valley International Council, which focuses work on the community and the local school system. So these funds will just go a very long way to supporting the efforts of OPI and OVIC and the School of International Studies and Languages to globalize and internationalize the region that we live in, and to bring language and culture to the community. So we appreciate this. We're very excited to invest in knowledge of culture and language of Korea in the community. So thank you so much.
And now our next giving back recipient is the annual Hanji retreat in Oberlin, Ohio. And it's coordinated by Miss Aimee Lee. And Aimee is continuing the tradition of which is very fascinating. You'll find out in a little bit of making traditional Korean paper. So Aimee, I think you're up here. Our treasurer's up here already. So congratulations.
Front of the camera.
Wait, you should be in the middle.
Yes, put you to work already.
We good? Okay, round of applause.
This is such an honor. Thank you so much to Friends of Korea. When Gerry mentioned this, I thought it was a joke. And then I see this check. So what I do every year is run this 5-day workshop so that you can learn from the actual bark. I bring you the plant all the way to the finished sheet, how to make Hanji in the traditional Korean method. And it's a very very exclusive class because I can only fit so many people into the space, and I want everyone to have a lot of time at the bat because it's one of the very few places and that you can learn this, not even just here with me, but you can't even really do this in Korea. You'll see when I talk about it, it's very difficult to find someone to teach you. And so this will just make it so much more accessible. And I really look forward to, actually, I will probably want to talk to Gerry after this about maybe trying to earmark it for someone specifically from either from this area or, you know, a younger student who otherwise can't afford taking this class. So I'm really, really grateful. I think this will really expand access to the next generation. So thank you.
All right, so now the moment we've all been waiting for is our plenary speaker, Miss Aimee Lee. And before Aimee speaks, we'd like to have Melissa Havlin say a few words about Aimee. And Melissa is a professor in the College of Fine Arts at Ohio University.
Thank you, everyone. I was lucky enough at the very recent North American Hand Papermakers Conference be able to take one of Aimee Lee's workshops, but to also get to hear her speak about her newest book. So she's a really influential papermaker in our country, and she's an incredibly, important person to have here for you for many other reasons. But yeah, I just wanted to say a few words about Aimee. Aimee Lee is an artist, papermaker, writer, and the leading Hanji researcher and practitioner in North America. Her Fulbright research on Korean paper led to her award-winning book, Hanji Unfurled, and the first U.S. Hanji studio in Cleveland, Ohio. Her artwork resides in many collections, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, MoMA, Stanford, UCLA, and Yale. She has shown at the Fuller Craft Museum, Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking, Korean Cultural Service, and Korean Cultural Center. Her work has appeared in the Korean Times, the New York Times, the Plain Dealer, KBS World Radio, PBS, and CNN's great big story. And she has taught and lectured extensively about paper and paper making at museums, art centers, and universities. And then.
Thank you, everyone. So should I stay in front of this camera for the
Yeah.
online? Okay, great. Thank you so much for coming. This is my first time also in this region and in Athens, and it's been such a warm welcome. And so I'm gonna show you an ungodly amount of slides, so it's gonna go kind of fast, but is this okay? So this is an image of Kim Dae-jung, who was the president of South Korea from, I think, somewhere around 98 to 2003, and marrying my great aunt, Lee Hee-ho, and her eldest brother was my grandfather. And I think that a lot of the way that I approach the world is somehow, I mean, there's so many influences, and so it might be cheesy to say this is one of them, but he was one of the first head of one of the first stock companies in Korea, and then forced to stop his work and all his, they tried to take all the money away from him because he was related to someone who was part of the resistance movement in Korea. But he was a very serious amateur photographer. And so he built a darkroom in his home in Seoul, and this was a big deal. It was also a big deal when we visited in the summer that he for his personal bathroom, he had a Western style toilet, which was unusual. And this is an image that he took of my father and myself and my younger sister in New York, because he would love visiting. He would travel as much as possible. He spoke like 6 different languages as a young person. I never understood why he would know some of these languages, but now I understand more about history and why he would know Japanese or why he would know Russian. And then I was born and raised in New York. So I was born in Flushing when it was still a very Korean neighborhood, and then raised in the suburbs north of New York City. And we grew up along the Hudson River. And I think there was something about this kind of endless flow of water that we were right next to that attracted me to papermaking, which I didn't actually get into until I was in graduate school. So I went to Oberlin College thinking I was going to be a violinist. And then I quickly realized I was really not that great and I didn't want to practice 8 hours a day. So I switched to an art major, but still use my violin and my artwork. And this is actually during graduate school in Chicago at Columbia College. I had a performance at the Chicago Cultural Center, and I made paper, had people write stories of journeys to me. I had a paper costume and it was a train I dragged around the Cultural Center, and I would play improvisations based on the stories that I would read to fill the space. And I was doing these durational performances. But really, I was so in love with paper making. And so this on the left, you see, that was my MFA thesis, and it was a 14-foot tower of bricks, and they're all paper bricks. I made over 2,000 to kind of fashion the whole thing. And when my family came to see it, my mother asked my sister, was she thinking about Chonsolte when she made this? And I realized I wasn't, but as soon as I looked it up online, I started to cry because I realized that there's somewhere it was embedded. And actually, back when I was a student at Oberlin, I learned how to make artist books, and I had made a series of 2 books about my parents before they met each other, because they met in New York. They didn't meet in Korea. They were different classes and never had that chance to meet. So I have collected all these pictures of them, and this is, for those of you who don't know, it's an old observatory from the 7th century. It's one of the few of that time that still exists in Southern Korea. And it's one of those things that everyone is dragged to. Like, I grew up in New York, so we went to Philly for day trips and DC for overnights, and you see all the monuments, and Korean students had to do the same. They would see things like this, national treasures. And I had pictures of my mother in her school uniform, my dad in his school uniform, us as teenagers being dragged to this place in the summer when it was so hot. Why are we here? And so there was something that I knew that was still there that made me want to connect my artwork to Korea. And it's not a straight line, but it's still, there was like family that helped me along the way very directly. And then there was family kind of indirectly. So this is an image of my great aunt, and she's alongside the proprietor of Wonju Hanji, and this was a framed photo they had in their booth. And when I was trying to, before I went to Korea, I wrote letters to the people who I wanted to study with. I want to do this, and they said, sure, just contact us when we get there. As some of you know, the Fulbright process takes at least a year, to even get going. And so they had probably forgotten about me by then. And I just kind of traveled around meeting as many people as I could. And this man said, when he met me, he was like, you can't work here. You're a woman. You don't look very physically strong. So you would be useless. But the only way I got in the door is because when I went to this Hanji festival in Wonju, I saw this photograph, and I was talking to his wife, and it's usually the wife who was doing all the sales and blocking you from seeing the husbands. And I said, can I visit? And she said, no. And I said, oh, but that's my great aunt. And and then everything changed, oh, you can come visit. And so I'm going to take you through, usually I show a video, but I'm going to take you quickly through some of the steps. These are all things that I did in Korea. This is a field of pepper plants after the harvest. So all these stems that are left have to be cleared and then burned. And you need that to make ash to cook the fiber to make paper. So this is my teacher, Chang Sung-woo of Changjibang in Gabong, Korea. This is further north, northern part of South Korea. And he had an agreement with the farmer that he would get to take the leftover stems. And then as a return, in return, at some point, he would give him paper. And so then we would have to haul it all back to the paper mill and burn it. And it has to be burned a certain way so you get it to be a high pH. And then you have to mix it with water, later with water to create. Basically, this is kind of like a potash that you create. And then you have a high alkalinity solution to cook your fiber. So that's one whole thing. Then this is the process. This is Hyunse further south in Uideong. And he's making that solution right now. And then you have to have another set of plants, which are the plants you use to make paper. These are paper mulberry trees that are harvested one by hand with just a sickle. And you have to wait till all the sap goes down, the leaves fall off. And this was in a field. Again, we had an agreement. He had agreement with the farmer. This is what we're doing. We're along the training embankment. He showed me which ones are the right trees. And then a train came by and honked its horn. And then someone came from the train company and was like, "What are you doing?" And he explained, and he let us go. But then you have to steam all of those shoots so that you can get the outer woody core the outer bark to separate from the inner core. But in the meantime, I was more interested because I am Korean descent, very interested in food. And so I had brought with me, one of my aunts had sent me with boguma, which is the little sweet potatoes. And so I was busy putting them in the fire to roast, to eat. So I was doing that at the same time as I was tending this fire so that we could steam these. You do that for a few hours. And then you can see the outer bark is kind of pulling away from the inner core, and at that point you strip them all, and so you can see separated. It's that stripped part that you need to use to scrape away all the outer layers. It's all done by hand. There's no way to mechanize this. It's not like an AI solution at all. And so this is actually Shinhanse traditional Hanji. And you can see the taller part is kind of quote unquote waste fiber that's used for second-rate paper that would wrap the good paper, and the one in the foreground is the white bark. And then you have to cook it, right, in that solution that you had made. And you cook this until it softens and it removes any impurities and anything that will degrade into something acidic, which is gums, pectins, lignins, and waxes, so that the paper lasts for a very long time. And this is why Hanji, which is Korean paper, Han means Korean, Chi means paper. So if you say Hanji, that means Korean paper. You don't say Hanji paper because it means Korean paper. Hanji is not an adjective. Hanji is not a qualifier. It is its own word. And I think it's really important when you are trying to share craft or culture that you always share language, which is, I think, why it's so important. What OU is doing is really important, that the language is the key part of the export of the culture. So Hanji means Korean paper. After you've cooked it, you have to remove it. They usually then cover it to steam for a little while longer overnight, and then you have to clean it all. You have to rinse out any of the remaining caustic solution. You have to go through every single piece of bark one by one. Of course, this is relegated to women's labor. So it's women who like work until they die doing this, like all day, just picking bark by hand. Every little last bit is taken out, and then it's beaten. And so there's a process of beating by hand, which is actually what we do. Like when I teach my students here, we beat by hand. And this is my teacher's father, Chang Young-kun, who he was the national treasurer of making Hanji before he passed away several years ago. And he just took this batch of, remember that scraped away fiber, we would cook that separately. And he literally just threw it on the floor and found like a 2x4 and just started smashing it. And then there's also their machines. And so this is, in Japanese, they call it a naginata. In Changjibang, they have a special kind that they wouldn't let me photograph the blades. It's in my book I got. There was a Japanese guy who photographed it anyway. But and it helps tease apart the fibers into the last kind of like finishing process, and then it comes out into this trough, and then it's ready to then go into the vat. So here's the vat that you fill with water, then you put in that beaten fiber, then you agitate it with a bamboo rod for at least half an hour. And then there's a whole other plant you have to grow and harvest and use. And these are the roots of hibiscus plants. So you've seeded them every year, you've let them grow. Anytime it starts flowering, you pinch off the flowers, you're trying to feed the root and get really fat roots. Because once you get, once you beat the roots and you soak them in cold water, then they ooze this mucilage that's very much like what comes out of okra. And it's actually, okra can be used as this formation, what we call a formation aid, and it's very crucial to any kind of Asian style papermaking. And somehow people in Korea figured out that this was the right plant. They would sometimes also use hollyhock, which is in the same mallow family as okra. And then there's a process of straining this out several times and then adding to it the vat, and then again, agitating for half an hour with the bamboo rod. And then you can start sheet formation. So Mr. Chang, he would just kind of start the batch for me, and then his sons were like, Amy's never gonna learn if you like keep on starting it. That's the hardest part. And they said, well, he's deaf, and I felt like he was like selectively deaf, and he would just pretend he didn't. He would always just start it for me. But Mr. Shin Hyun-tae, he is now the national treasurer of Hanji making. There are a couple of other people who are designated because they keep designating people and then they pass away. So this is kind of insurance. But Mr. Shin is in his 80s now. So I don't know how much longer he'll go. But this is the traditional style of papermaking in Korea, which has really kind of gone away because through Japanese occupation, through industrialization, and there are very few people who know how to do this in an expert manner. And there's a method of after you make a sheet, you get it off the screen, and then there's threads you put between them so you can separate them. You can see he's removing the screen, and then you can use the screen again to make more. And then you have to press out the excess water, and he has a hydraulic press that's operated by a switch, so he doesn't have to pump it himself. At Changjibang, we would pump our own. All of the presses that I use in my practice, I pump it myself, and it's a matter of feel. And you have to be really careful because if you overpress, then all of those sheets you make just turn into one big sheet of paper and you've wasted your time. So, and then once you've gotten enough water out, you can separate. You have to pull out the threads and you separate each sheet. And in the Korean method, it's 2 sheets make 1 sheet, and they're called sometimes eumyangji, which is like it's almost like yin yang paper, because of the way that the frame is suspended. There's the front part of the sheet is a little thicker than the back, and so they would make a second sheet, flip it, and then they would meet and make one kind of perfect fold. So, and then you'd brush them onto wooden boards or probably walls as well in the past in Korea, and then they would dry. As you can see here, I'm removing the thread. And then now they have things like these forced heat dryers. So behind me is this steel dryer that has steam inside. And so once you get 3 sheets down, the first one's already dry, and you just keep removing and taking off, and it goes a lot faster. Some conservators don't like this. They want it to air dry, but for our purposes, it's pretty safe to use that way. And then the final step is tochim, which is hammering. And this is something that when Korea was a vassal state to China, China would say, we would want this year this many hundreds or no thousands and thousands of sheets of white hammered paper. So they knew that the Koreans picked it very clean, and they did this hammering technique, which would smooth the surface and make it the ink bleed less and just a really nice compact surface. It's very rarely done, and it's basically just this thing that goes up and down, right? And then you store your paper, and ideally you age it. You would want to age it for at least a year. Probably 10 years is good. And it's because actually I learned this from a friend who studied in Japan, and it's the same idea. You want the fibers to have time to settle. And her teacher said, when a piece of paper is freshly made, it's like a new baby. It's like wriggling around. And so you need to wait until it calms down before you want to use it. So for printing, you would want to wait at least a year, if not 10. And then this is the dog that they had at Hanji. I had to stay in a love motel down the street because that was the closest place I could stay in a like religious cult area. And every day I'd walk there in the winter, and there was like a pack of dogs that would start running after me, and it was like, oh my God, they're going to eat me. And then as soon as I passed through the gates, this dog would start barking, and then they would go away. But it's just terrifying every day. And then my teacher had 2 young daughters at the time, so they would do things like this. And so I was lucky to be there when he was there, when his youngest brother was there, and then his second brother. And this is also very confusing about who was who, and like what this second brother apparently would just go to sea and then come back and not tell anyone where he was going, and he'd show up sometimes. He was the best paper maker in the family, but never stayed. And I always thought that my teacher was the eldest son of his father. And he is, later I found out all kinds of gossip. He is the eldest son of the second wife. And there was all kinds of drama about what he had been doing with the second wife when the first wife was still alive. But there are other kids, they're just not in the family business. Unfortunately, right now, it's only my teacher who's doing the work. And then 2 of the 3 women at the Ajuma that I work with who were really, really, caring about wanting me to stay in like a heated box container during lunch, and letting me like have the hottest spot to lay down after lunch, and like giving me extra food. And they always made me feel so like my ego was so great, because they would be like, you're so tall. And and then they would do things like this in this box container where I had the only internet connection. So the love motel didn't have it. And so I would stay after work, and I would blog and email people. And they had a job one day that they had to take the beaten fiber, and they had to pluck it in chunks and then let it dry, because they would just sell that as like, it was almost like paper potpourri at the store in Seoul that they had in Isadong. And so, but they knew that I was like obsessed with using the computer. And so at the end of the day, they made this little path for me to the computer. And you can see in the back, that desk is actually just like a regular wooden desk, and my teachers papered over it with more Hanji. So these are just some of the teachers and some of the people that I met that I was very fortunate to work with, either national or provincial intangible cultural property holders of things related to either Hanji making the screens for Hanji, or making screens in general, because the guy who makes the Hanji screens refused to teach me, so I had to find somebody else who was like the next closest person. And then I didn't do all, this I didn't do all at once. This was across 2 or 3 visits to Korea. I came back and I wanted to share this. And so I ended up building the first Korean papermaking studio in Cleveland at the Morgan Conservatory. And we built this big vat and all the stuff that we needed. So they had just planted a garden of the paper mulberry trees that are used traditionally in Korea. We would steam them every year after harvesting, strip the bark, scrape the bark. We made these scraping platforms like they were made in Korea. And then soon I realized that you don't actually need them this way for Americans, because Americans sit at tables, so it doesn't need to be elevated. This is only if you're sitting on the floor working. But then the scraping knives were a big deal. And so you can see the Korean one that I had gotten from another American researcher, Lynn Amley. Or I got it through one of her friends, Jana Pullman, in Minneapolis. And then I had an American blacksmith do a prototype and then the final version, so that we could produce many more knives, so we could all work together. And then you have to dry the bark, and then once it's dry, you can just store it indefinitely, and then when you need it, you use it. We have people donate their wood ashes from their wood burning stoves to make cooking lye. We cook it. These days, we really just use soda ash because it's much easier to get, much more reliable pH. Then we would have these are two of my apprentices in 2014, picking and cleaning the bark. Then all volunteers were beating the bark. We commissioned David Reyna, who is a beater builder in New York City. He usually makes Hollander style beaters for European style paper making. And I asked, can you make this? And naginata in Japanese is a curved sword, and it's a curved blade that's mounted to a long stick that was used in warfare. But it's a different kind of machine. It's not technically a beater, but we call it that. And so he made the first stainless steel one in the country for us to use. And then we had to build this big vat, and we had to finish it with marine epoxy, and then we had to build frames for the screens, and the frames are paltur, and the screens are pal. We were making test screens. This is a total disaster, did not work. You cannot make paper making screens out of stainless tape wire, but someone donated it to us, so we tried. And then the interns started to use the vat. I started teaching in Cleveland, so I had students, and then I had apprentices. This is the pressing process because the Morgan has so many presses, and then boarding it. You can see it's like not just wood boards, but just anything you can find, like even tabletops, like where you're at, we could dry paper if we really had to. And then this is a heated dry box that Tim Barrett and the University of Iowa donated to us, which is basically made out of heat lamps that are embedded inside this box. And sometimes we just dry outside, air dry. And sheets are actually on in synthetic interfacing that we clip to the fences. And then the screens were really the one thing that was hard for me to reproduce in the States. So this is why I did the second Fulbright to study with Cho Dae-young, who is the national treasure of making bamboo blinds. And then again, like going back to this idea of the plants, there's a lot of horticulture and gardening that goes in with this. So at the Morgan, we seeded all these hibiscus plants in the top left corner. Those are actually seeds that I was given by Shinhan. And so then you have to gather seeds every year because you're yanking the entire plant out of the ground. So you can't, that's an annual anyway. So, and then you can see he uses the actual roots. Usually it's much easier in teaching settings to use polyacrylamide. So it's a polymer that's used, and they use it in both industrial paper making and handmade paper making. And then he also showed me the ideal time to harvest burdock furs, which they would use as like scrubbies to clean your screens. For years, I would just like spray it with high powered hose, and it would just make the situation worse. Like the strands would kind of wrap around and clog it even more. And I would use a toothbrush, and that didn't work, but these work really well. So, and then we also started a dye garden. And so these are some tests of dyed paper using marigolds and dahlias. And so I wanted to, of course, share this widely beyond the studio. And so I wrote this book, which I have here also, if you want to look at Hanji Unfurled. And it's essentially like a travelogue about what it took for me to even access these teachers and everything I learned. So a little bit about my work. This is, some of you may recognize the Sheila gold crowns of that time when they just did amazing expert gold working. And I just love those jade kamas where art historians still don't even know like what they signify. And but I translated it with Hanji, and it's like the piece on the right is mine and my experience of living in Korea, which is it's like over 70% mountains, which for me was a big change from the places that I was living. And then in 2012, I started to make dresses out of Hanji, and I learned a lot about how hard it is to make clothes and how it's essentially it's sculpture. You have to have 2D pieces that wrap around a human body, which is 3-dimensional. And these are using all sample book Hanji pieces that I rolled and sewed individually. And then I thought, why am I doing, like Western dresses? I should be looking at hanbok as well. And so I was using different dyes and different techniques of surface design on paper. These are also inspired by different kinds of Korean dress styles. Again, I'm not trained at all as a seamstress or a pattern maker, or dressmaker, or fashion historian, but this is all just I've always been so curious about everything. And so just reading, like, I don't know how many of you here want to be artists. So much of being an artist is about research and learning. And so the dress on the right is based off of the style of a chulli, which was actually comes from Mongolian dress of mounted riders. So it was easier to kind of get on a horse if you had this pleated skirt. And then they would have detachable sleeves so that if you were hunting, that it was easier to rip it off and then bandage yourself this is bow and arrow hunting, if you were hurt, and then you just keep working. This is a piece, all the outer parts are bark, and it's the bark that makes the paper. And then the inner parts are hanji that I've dyed with indigo and then printed over with more bark that I've laced. And so it's a kind of mix of different kinds of techniques of 3 paper bark substrates, which I learned. So like the grid parts are more referencing things that would have happened in present day Mexico. The lacing I learned from both American and Korean teachers. And then this is a Humboldt inspired piece that's all just the bark that makes the paper, and then indigo dye. This is all hanji, but then the skirt and all the trimmings are printed with the bark that's spread out to lace, inked up, relief printed onto hanji. So it's like this complete circle of this one plant providing both the material, the substrate, and the matrix, the pattern. And this happens to actually be now the book cover of a translation of Kim Soon new book that Rutgers University Press just published this fall, No Handheld Mine. And then these are samples of this idea of just using the bark for the entire hemp book on the left in the collection now in the Museum of Art, and then a print of it. There is a way to print things without getting ink onto the matrix, and this is through pressure printing, and I did that all in an etching press. And so on the right, it's all hanji, and it's all printed from the first dress, and that's in this collection of Kent State University Museum. The 2 of them are hanging in the middle of this gallery between, I can't remember if it was 16th or 17th century Korean tomb excavated garments. And at the Cleveland Museum of Art, this was at a show last year called Korean Couture, and it was a great honor to be in this show. And all of my work, so much of it has involved just going to different collections, museum collections, befriending curators, befriending conservators, and then letting me into storage. Laurel Kendall was a huge help to me when I started my research, before I went to Korea, and throughout and after, and she gave me a lot of access to the American Museum of Natural History storage and all the objects they have made of hanji. And so it was just such an honor to be able to actually show the work that's inspired by things like that between actual artifacts from Korea. This is another one of those pieces that I made at the same time as those just pictured. And that one right now is at Oberlin, their Allen Memorial Museum of Art. And I will be giving a talk there in November, but that shows up through June 21st. So if you ever have a chance to go to Oberlin, that show is there, and it's also a great honor that in the next gallery is Monet. So the places that Hanji will take you, right? So and then I approached paper at first through books. I learned how to make artist books in Oberlin, and then specifically chose the book arts program in Chicago for grad school. And so it all kind of feeds itself. So once I learned to make paper, I was making books out of that paper. So you can see that gridded bark again, the paper, the hanji that's dyed with indigo, and then I was also doing a lot of printing on this and these. This is in the show at Oberlin as well. And then because I love these connections, I wanted to do this mashup of dresses and books. And so this is one of the artist books that I did that's in 10 different collections from coast to coast. And it's really just about how people think that we are all so disconnected, or that like my experience is so, you know, like I'm being so persecuted or discriminated against, but even the people that you think would be like the most privileged, like in the case of this book, like it was just like a young, white, blonde, cisgender male who was like the star of a rock band. And even he felt like, you know, that he was out of place in certain, and so this idea that, we all think that, but if we all just like talk to each other, we really have a lot more in common than not. And then this is another book that was about my mother and her mother, and about my great aunt, and just generations of women. And I actually made Hanji dresses that then I took apart that became the pages of this. And then also there's a dress in here that goes with the narrative of swimming and washing clothes in boats and water and in Korea. And then I also made a lot of knitted books, and this is because I think there is something very powerful of having a page that is extremely tactile and has lots of holes and spaces where for kind of slippage of meaning or folding of meaning. It's just a meaning that might be a mystery to you. And I've done that for many years, and I have a sample here that if you can look at later. This is one that very sadly was lost by the post office, so if you ever see it, please let me know. It was lost in Birmingham, Alabama. And this is the book that's here. And this one is all about the brain fog and joys of perimenopause. And so I think, especially in this case, this idea of everything falling out of your head and holes in the pages makes a lot of sense. But I also was interested in using the techniques I learned in Korea, like Chusung, which is paper basketry to make books. And so this is an example on the left of a piece in a private collection in Santa Fe. And then on the right, kind of my first going back to my Chusung teacher in Korea and learning how to make asymmetrical objects. And then looking at like things like the Celadon ceramic piece, Cleveland Museum of Art, and going from being able to do straight up things to tipping them a little. And then again, tipping them, but also mixing them with marbling. And then also, again, this idea of mashups and hybridizing a board turning into a duck, which is because I saw this image on the left in a book, museum catalog from the 80s about paper culture around the world at the Mingei Folk Museum. And this is Korean 19th century wedding duck. And some of you may already know about the wooden wedding ducks that are carved to look like male and female, and they're meant to mate for life and have a lot of babies. So you give them to newlyweds. And I wanted to create versions of those as a technical challenge, but also to kind of look at maybe like we would just ask the bird what they think instead of have it just be about like heteronormative marriage traditions. So this is another version of one that my Chusung teacher found in a book. He would only teach me things if he knew that Koreans had made them in the past. So if I said, I want to make a duck, he'd be like, why would you want to do that? And if I showed him a picture, he said, okay, let's do that. Or he didn't show me how to make a duck, but he showed me how to make a teapot. And I didn't want to do this because he said, you have to do this. And once I did it, I realized why. And it's because once you learn how to take parts of a body off of the main body and split things, you can do things like put wings on a duck. You can do things like you can open their mouths. I have this here also for you to see. It's much smaller than in this photo. And just different variations on these. I use mostly all natural dyes. Like these are actually red onion skins, which give you an olive green color. This is Brazil wood and then mixed with indigo. This is indigo, and this is a mashup of a book inside a duck. And this is about kind of the things that we do. The reason that I think that humans kind of do the things we do to the world is because we are inherently comfortable with like the wilderness inside of ourselves, that we just try to destroy the wilderness that's in the world. So this is now just going into different places so the way I try to approach all the advocacy I do for Hanji is by exhibiting my artwork. So this is in like many different places around the world. This was the United Arab Emirates Korean Embassy, where I took 2 of my students and curated them into a show. And then teaching. This is at Oberlin. I teach every January. We go through every process of processing the plants. I give them 2 different kinds of plants, both from, traditionally from Asia and also from North America. We use milkweed. And so I have a book here about milkweed papermaking if you're interested to look at that kind of process. And so the students here learn how to do Asian style papermaking, European style papermaking, bookbinding, natural, they're doing here natural dyeing. I don't work as much with, but have worked with younger children. This was all adoptees, Asian adoptees in Ohio. This is one of my neighbors whose mother's Korean, the teacher of the Chusung method. And then just this, lectures and demos all over the world actually. So this is in Australia, this is in Chile, this is in Canada, this is in Austria, back in Australia, Western Australia, New York City, Mills College, sadly, when it was open. That was one of my first teaching appointments. North Bennett Street School in Boston. This is a biennial book arts event in Oregon. Minnesota Center for the Book. Providence for Brown at RISD, the Res College, University of Michigan, Paper Book Intensive, which happens every year in Saugatuck, Michigan, Peters Valley, New Jersey, Penland School of Craft in North Carolina, who will host the first ever Hanji Summit that I'm organizing next fall of my former Hanji students and fund us all. And the apprentice of my teacher, Shinkanse, will be coming as well from Korea to join us. As long as, fingers crossed, we don't have issues with visas. And then Cleveland Museum of Art, Oxbow School of Art, also at Saugatuck. And you can see I'm using this bat that I built, I designed so that it breaks down and I can drive around in it. So this is in Houston. I didn't drive to Houston, so I didn't take the bat there, but this is the Korean language school that would happen through Middlebury College on the Mills campus. Wells College, which demonstrated why chalkboards are actually very useful for drawing paper. And then Women's Studio Workshop, upstate New York, San Francisco, Dieudonné, New York, teaching all different kinds of students. And I especially connect with these Korean diaspora students who are looking for this connection. And so this is the bat that my friend Bill Lorton helped me make, this knockdown bat. And then I give the drawings to all my students. So Steph Rue in Sacramento, who's now starting in January, will be the assistant professor of book arts at the University of Iowa. She'll be their first professor of color in the program, and she'll lead a papermaking program that specializes in Japanese papermaking. And then when I taught this retreat, one of my students, Bobby Cho Henderson, he is in North Carolina, and he made himself 2 bats. And this is Fanny Thibodeau, and she's from France, an adoptee. And then I'll just end by saying this was the Seo Jong-im is the wife and now the widow of Yu Bae-gun, who was the last person designated. He was a Jeollado provincial holder of bamboo screen making, specifically for Hanji making. And he passed away last year, and she's the only person left making them. And so I send my students as much as possible to her. And that's really like the next generation. And I really have been trying to encourage more AAPI students, more Korean diaspora students, but just students of from anywhere to feel okay exploring their heritage. And so this is just, a list of different things that I've been trying to do to spread Hanji awareness. So I believe 100% direct transmission. So seeking out and finding teachers in Korea, writing and publishing, making and exhibiting the art, building Hanji studios, teaching students of all ages, lecturing, workshops here and abroad, and then teaching and mentoring and convening Korean diaspora students. And these are some of mine. And I don't say that they're all Korean. This includes Chinese, Chinese American, and a Vietnamese and Chinese American, but to me, it's all part of the same family. So I hope that some of you will join me in the future in the Hanji retreat or in other opportunities future. And then what I have here for you, you're welcome. I hope we have some time for Q&As, but I have just samples of things. So as long as your hands are clean, that you're welcome to handle things. I have books, like resources here, so that you can look, if you want to do more research yourself. And then samples of Hanji that are over here using different dyes and different fibers. And then that's the kind of for sale, different books. And I didn't mention, but the book that I just did that came out this July is all about tool makers for hand paper making. And that was inspired by this whole issue of the bamboo screens for Hanji and how it's disappearing. And so I unfortunately can only cover the European style paper tool makers, but in the intro I say specifically I named these Korean bamboo screen makers, and that they were the ones who started me on this. So thank you. And let me know if you have any questions.
If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. I'll give you the mic just so that the people online can hear you. So do we have any questions? Okay, I'm gonna go here and then I'll go to you, okay?
Thank you very much for coming. It was a great presentation. My name is Scout Gerry, and I was executive director of Papermaking for 7 years. And I started the paper mulberry production, and so I'm continuing that on. And I just want to make not a question, but an announcement that I'm offering in November. And we have paper mulberry that we actually got from Oregon that Sarah Guilford, who started Paper Store 9 years ago. And we will harvest that, a 3-day workshop, and it will be the aging, will be everything in my hand, and we'll use the process. It's great, and then we'll make some beautiful paper. We call it, Sarah called it the Japanese mouth. But when I look at your directions and what you're doing, it's, using some extreme concepts.
Yeah.
So I've got some flyers if anybody's interested in information.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for honoring Sarah's memory. Yeah, she's done amazing work, and it's great actually, because we always think we'll like plant the plants here and then they'll do okay, and there's been all kinds of instances of, bringing them over illegally from Japan, and then they are doing great in Iowa, and then they're given to Cleveland, and then they die in Iowa, and then Cleveland gives them back to Iowa to restart, and so there are also issues about, it being invasive or and then also about being safety. So if you ever are interested in doing this, be sure you always only propagate male plants and not female plants, because you can control the spread a little bit with the men, not the men, but because they only spread by runners, but the female plants, the seeds can go very far.
So I just wanted to ask where I supposed to do. No, I was next.
No, the mic. No, it's for the audience online.
Alrighty, well, here I am. I looked you up online, can I see the different places where you are exhibiting work? Because
Yes.
are there many places in Ohio?
Well, right now in Ohio, I'm exhibiting at Oberlin, and then I'm showing in Minneapolis and one more place that I don't know why I've forgotten, but it's all online. Yeah, it's in the news section. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will also warn all of the students, and I don't know if this is as much an issue. There is a big problem, and I don't know if it's been resolved because my last Fulbright was in 2021. If you are of Korean descent, there is a major problem with getting a Fulbright to Korea that you have to get resolved because in 2010 Korea passed a law that means that any person born to Korean nationals outside of Korea retains some bit of Korean nationality, which means that they cannot get the visa that you need to go to Korea on the Fulbright unless you renounce formally your nationality to the Ministry of Justice. But it's often a nationality you didn't know you had because you were born an American citizen. So this was something that they threatened to take away my Fulbright. Fulbright Korea said, if you don't show us paperwork for this. And so this is something that I hope maybe it's figured out by now. And Ms. Shim, when she was a director, made it work every time, but I worry that it discriminates against Korean Americans. But if you are of Korean descent and interested in going to Korea on a Fulbright, definitely make sure you check out that stuff before things, go awry.
Okay, so we have a question from Karen Pierce online. She says that you mentioned that people you learned from in Korea were sometimes reluctant to teach you. Could you tell if that was because you're a woman, or if it was because you're American, or both, or some maybe third reason?
I think it was a lot of different reasons, and I think Korea is similar to other cultures where it gets handed down within a family and you're not of the family. It's close to you, or if you're not of the place, it's close to you. For sure, what I was most interested in learning with Hanji making was the sheet formation style, which is traditionally always done by men. So that was also kind of close to me. The women did everything else. They did all other steps, but that was usually done by men. And then it was also, yes, because I was American and not intending to stay in Korea, the idea is, why would we teach you if you're just gonna leave? Or what does that do for us? And even my first teacher said, in the middle of teaching me, was like, what, am I gonna even be able to like eat and feed myself if I give you all this information? And I think because it's a different mentality as to, you know, why you would be doing this. And I would see that like my choosing teacher was kind of like that, where he would charge me lots and lots of money, which I'm glad he felt like he could do. He was like incredible master of the craft, but part of that came from old style Korean thinking about Americans having a lot of money. And also for him, he at first said, I don't want to teach. He specifically said, I don't want to teach Japanese. And he had been invited to teach in Japan and he turned it down, but he's since changed his mind. But I think it's a whole mix. And even my family, like my uncle said, why are you learning to make hanji? Will it help you find a husband? And so there's that, like, what is this? Is this helping our, you know, race? If you are running around as an old 30-year-old old maid, like this is not gonna make you more attractive to a man, and your job is to have babies. So I think it was a lot of different things. Yeah, thanks for that question.
You made, did you hand sew the paper? Like, how did you like put it together? And also think what accents were you looking at if you were?
Yeah. The hanbok that I make, usually I sew on a sewing machine, just a regular old sewing machine. There are like details that I might have to finish by hand. And then the thing that I love the most about working with paper and bark is that you can also you can do things you can't do with fabric, which is you can just glue them. You know, there are cheats that you can do that are fine. Because for me, they're not meant to be worn, they're just meant to be hung up as pieces of art. So the pieces that I was looking at were things that were like things that came to Cleveland for that show. That was an incredible way of actually me not even having to go anywhere. Like they had 2 rotations because they were so well preserved that, yeah, it's just really incredible. So those are from the Gyeonggi-do, like the Gyeonggi Provincial Museum. So if you wanted to see those, like a lot of those tomb excavated garments are in Korea. And then a lot of it is also just looking at books. So like there's a newer book that came out in the last few years, like dress history of Korea, where they're looking at kind of first hand sources and different approaches to like learning about dress, because there's not as many artifacts obviously in Korea because of all the war and destruction. So looking at paintings or reading you know, texts describing the things that people were wearing. So those have been really helpful as well.
Yeah, there's like a big version of the painting. Did you ever get to like?
I didn't, but Yinsun Peng, who is a senior textile conservator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, she's done a lot of that research and really recommend you look up. This is Aimee weaving and hemp. She was focusing actually a lot on hemp and comparing Japanese and Korean. Also, how much that production was affected when the U.S. criminalized like not just cannabis, but the whole rest of the plant, which is does not have any THC in it. So, but that affected Japan and Korea, that they also were they restricted it, even though it's traditionally part of their culture. But yeah, Aimee is a huge thing. I think also that Yoon Peng, who is a new history professor, Chinese history specialist at Oberlin, her research has been on Aimee and bamboo papermaking in China. I think indigo, but like other crops. So there are more and more people doing, like I see this in academia, like the historians are approaching craft in a different way, craft history and craft as technology. So But I didn't get, that's the thing that's amazing, like if you wanna go to Korea, like I just did Hanji and then was lucky enough to go into natural dyeing, calligraphy, Kisum and Chumchi, but there are so many other rabbit holes you can fall down. You're welcome.
No questions? I'm not sure how much time if you wanna start moving on.
This may need food, so quickly. But there's a couple of things. Let me just take this phone call real quick.
Okay, that means we gotta get one more question next.
One more.
It's okay if
Yes.
there's not, you just want to force people to make.
You hear? Yeah.
But can we,
But you're
Okay.
welcome to,
Right.
yeah, later when you can get up, you're welcome to take a look and if they, you might have questions now.
alright, can we thank Aimee?
The food is 5 minutes away and we'll need some help for people to put out and carry it up. But so I'm gonna use a couple of those minutes. This is from Amy's book and it really is delightful to read. It's much of what she said here. But for people applying for Fulbrights, I want you to listen to this. This was her second time Fulbright. And she said, for the second time, I knew that I had to go back to Korea. I received a Fulbright research grant, which I intended to learn to make traditional Hanji at a paper mill. Okay, check. She did that, right? To create a network of people who cared about its preservation. Check. To interview artists who used Hanji. Check. To integrate Hanji into my artwork. Check. And to disseminate the information online. I stated in my proposal that I would return to the United States, build a Hanji facility, and teach Korean papermaking. I think she accomplished her Fulbright research. Yes, closing remarks. Okay, so first of all, just to thank everyone for attending today. And again, stick around. I know, take a little bathroom break. The restrooms are out there. The artifacts you're seeing here are just for display. It's from Korea. Amy's materials here and have clean hands, right?
Yes.
Have clean hands, that's
And like touching greasy things, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the bathrooms are right up there. She has her books for sale there. And in the back over there, actually, that's from the Korean Embassy in Washington, DC. Those are some giveaways, some free stuff you can take. And if you haven't received one of the Friends of Korea bags, we have some more here as well. And so I hope you enjoyed today's performance and program. And I'm hoping that, of course, we would love it if you became involved in Friends of Korea. But I hope, especially for the students here, that you learn this idea of going on an experience, whether you teach abroad. We have students from Japan who are studying right now in Athens. And I know when they go back, their faculty always tell me how much they've changed, even though sometimes the students don't even realize it. And some come back for master's degrees. So we have students from Japan, Chubu students. Would you like to stand up? Can we give a round of applause for them for coming and studying the field? And so they attended here as well. And thank you very much. Yeah. And I also like to say, Sarah Guilford had been referenced, and Sarah was a long time paper maker, I should say, and use Japanese style. And her daughter Susan is here tonight using K-Band. Susan, you like to stand up as well. And for Chubu students who are here, Susan and I taught at Chubu University at the same time many years ago too. And her mother was like Aimee, such a passionate advocate for papermaking. So it's very wonderful to have that in Southeast Ohio. So I want to pass that along. And support Friends of Korea too. You noticed with our Giving Back initiative Again, we don't pay ourselves. In fact, we, as individual board members, we probably lose a little money along the way.
Yeah.
But it's our own personal money, not the organization's. So we are very protective of having that money for outreach activities. So if you're interested ever in the future, the QR code is there. You can go online, www.friendsofkorea.net as well. And I would just like to say, how do you say thank you in Korean? 감사합니다.